We're gonna have to go backwards with this one because even though there were signs, I did not see this coming. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, welcome to my channel. My name is Stephanie Yates, Anya Buile, Steph Anya for short, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, I'm gonna break down everything that we saw unfold between Steven and Sabrina on Love is Blind UK. If you're curious, stay tuned. I want to thank the Paired app for sponsoring a portion of today's video. The Paired app is a wonderful resource for couples who are looking to build their connection. It provides you with questions, quizzes, and topics to help foster emotional intimacy in your relationship. What I love about the Paired app is that it's fun. Sometimes we'll pull it out at date night. Sometimes we'll use it even if we're just at the house together. It's so fun to learn more about each other, but it's more than just fun. It's also been very enlightening. As a marriage therapist myself, one of the things that I appreciate the most about the Paired app is that it is backed by relational experts. And so even though I am a relational expert, sometimes it's difficult to see your own situation from within. It's nice to have opportunities to talk about things that maybe we wouldn't have if we didn't have the app. If you would like to try the Paired app for yourself, please click the link in my description box for 50% off of a premium subscription. Now let's get back to the video. So I did a community tab post to see what videos you guys are most interested in, and you all had some fantastic suggestions. As expected, a Love is Blind video did top the list, and a lot of you wanted to see a breakdown of Sabrina and Steven. But I do plan to get to some of the other top commented suggestions that you all had on that post, so rest assured those are coming as well. Keep in mind there will be spoilers in this video, and please know that I have never met these people. The insight that I am providing is based on an edited production of a show. So we're not really seeing these people in their natural elements. We're seeing them in a very unnatural situation, which actually contributed to the downfall of Sabrina and Steven's relationship. So with these two, we really have to start with the reunion. The big shock that a lot of us saw was them sitting separately on the couches. And at first, honestly, I don't know if maybe they were just doing it for a surprise element. We've seen it before where a couple sits apart at the reunion and then they walk together to show that they are together. But with them, you could see right away with the body language, this was not just some sort of happenstance seating choice or something done just for fun. And I was thinking, oh gosh, something went very wrong here. I think they're a perfect example of maybe the right couple, wrong situation. So many times we underestimate the circumstances behind a relationship. Maybe you have met a person that you could have a very fulfilling life with, but the life that you two are currently living, your lifestyles, where you live, your financial makeup, your family situation, your religious differences, those things do matter. And even though we like to think that love conquers all, sometimes it's very difficult to navigate those differences and make a relationship work. I believe that Sabrina and Steven could have had a beautiful story. I believe they did have a beautiful story. Even Steven said that when he watches the first 4 episodes, he cries throughout them because it just reminds him of the beautiful connection that they had. But there is a real world after these shows, and this I think was the best example of that. Okay, so it wouldn't be fair to only focus on what went wrong in their relationship. I try to give a balanced perspective on these things, especially since for so many of us, the bright red flags don't always exist. Sometimes it's just yellow flags, things that could work or could not work, and we ignore them. So I think it's important to talk about what worked well in their relationship too, so that we can carry that over into our own relationships, but also to see the kind of things that we cannot ignore in favor of the things that we love the most about the person that we're seeing. So first date between Sabrina and Steven, they talked about having the same routine. I love that they both had similar mindsets about gratitude.
You meditate?
Yes, I do. I do gratitude journals.
This is so weird. I feel like you've just taken my daily routine.
And the thing I really, really love that Sabrina said that Steven agreed with is
We really important to get to the point where you're so happy in yourself. It's like it's not anyone else's job to make you happy.
Yeah.
Not expecting someone else to make you happy. That is such an important part of building a relationship that so many of us ignore. We get into a relationship and we feel happy and we think this is what it's going to be like forever in that relationship, and we become dependent on our partner and on the relationship for our happiness. So for Sabrina to come into the relationship with Steven knowing that she can't be dependent on another person for her happiness, I thought that was extremely healthy. The difficulty as we assess this couple is that so much of what went wrong in their relationship all happened off camera. There are some things that we can look at that would let us know that certain conversations weren't had to the level they probably should have been, or maybe people weren't really being honest about themselves and their needs, but so much of what happened with them happened off camera. So we can only speculate as to what really went wrong. And I'm curious if Sabrina and Steven were able to maintain that mentality that their happiness is not dependent on their relationship and not dependent on their partner. Then we get to a family connection. I thought it was interesting that they both had on jewelry, specifically rings from their grandparents who had passed on.
I have a little bracelet that says Gigi on it from my granny, who I was very, very close to. And then I have Gigi's ring on.
I've got my granddad's ring on my pinky finger. So when he passed away, I think I was about 8 years of age.
Oh my God, stop.
It's literally been on every single finger, even my thumbs.
That was another beautiful connection that I loved to see. Again, like I talked about in the Freddie and Kat video, I don't take those kind of things to mean they're destined, they're meant to be. But I did think that it was a great show of similar values, that they both really valued their relationship with their grandparents. They both thought it was important to hold on to these sentimental objects, and how family was a very important part of both of their core identities. So that to me was a really good connection, and something that I would consider to be a good sign of a couple being able to have a successful relationship outside of the pods. I think Sabrina and Steven for me were the couple that made me the most excited about seeing so many singles in their 30s on this season. The way that they talked about issues and seemed to really understand and hold space for one another, I thought was a sign of really good maturity. So Sabrina brings up the fact that it is important to her to wait to have children.
It's more important to me that I have a really good foundation with husband and wife. If I didn't have children, I think I'd be okay.
And she was already in her mid 30s. And so she was saying, this could be an issue for us. And at first, it seemed like this might end up being something really significant. And then Sabrina offered up the solution that she had in mind, which was asking him his thoughts on having a surrogate.
I'm very open to surrogacy, so it would be our biological child or adoption.
I'm here for that.
And Steven agreed with that suggestion. So I loved how they talked about that. I loved how neither one of them backed down on their personal goals. Sabrina did admit that being a mother is not something that's incredibly important to her. However, she did admit that it's something that she was open to, keeping in mind that she may have difficulty with carrying a child full term. So this couple did a wonderful job with being vulnerable and sharing intimate details about their past and their current lives. So Steven starts to share with Sabrina about his experience with his ex, who he was with for a long time and whose health started failing. And I was very curious. For me, this was going to be a test of Sabrina's ability to hear information about another important woman in his life and how she would process that. So Steven shared about his experience. He became very emotional. And another woman could look at that and say, wow, he's still hung up on his ex. And Sabrina just took that as, thank you for being open with me about that. I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Can I ask, is she okay?
And it didn't seem like she personalized it. I thought that was wonderful, because there are so many times that we hear something about our partner's past and we personalize it, even though we weren't even in their lives at that time. I was just thinking, wow, I love how Sabrina held that safe space for him and did not personalize what he was saying. Another aspect of Sabrina and Steven's relationship that I loved was their humor. I can always tell a lot about a couple based on if they have a similar similar sense of humor. Does that mean they both tell the same kind of jokes? No, but it does mean that you understand your partner's sense of humor and you actually find it funny. There is nothing that I will look at quicker than what happens when one of the partners tells a joke. How does their partner respond? Even a courtesy laugh or acknowledgement is better than what I see sometimes, which is an eye roll, frustration. Of course, sometimes those things are going to happen. You guys aren't perfect 100% of the time, but in general, do you find your partner funny? So from early on, I really love that Sabrina found Steven's humor even all the way to the Speedo. She found it funny. I didn't really hear Sabrina cracking a ton of jokes except when she was like kind of making fun of him, and he thought that was funny too. So those are always great signs. I honestly put in my notes, okay, Sabrina and Steven are going to be our golden couple. And what I call the golden couple is that usually on every season of Love is Blind, there's a couple who's really portrayed as the perfect couple. We really don't see them have any major issues with one another. They might have issues with their families, but they don't usually have issues with one another. And I usually don't even do a breakdown of those couples because I think the way that they're presented on the show is like so biased that we don't even get to see anything worth talking about. The only exception to that is Brett and Tiffany from season 4, because they actually had so much good happening in their relationship that I just had to talk about it, because there was just a lot for people to learn from the way that they were listening to each other and engaging with each other. But most of the time, I don't even do a video on the golden couple because we just don't really see the ins and outs of their relationship. A lot of times we do see them ultimately getting divorced, but sometimes it does work out. So at that point, I really thought Steven and Sabrina were going to be our golden couple. I kind of assumed that all the way through, you know, their wedding, it really wasn't going to be a question of if they said yes. So by the time we got to the reunion, you can imagine how shocked and I will say a little bit disappointed I was with the outcome of their relationship. Sabrina meets Steven's family and friends, and they're very skeptical. They're cynical about the situation.
I think it's crazy and very silly. I don't think I'd do what you guys have done.
So I never judge the family or friends for questioning why their family member is choosing to do this. I thought that Sabrina took it in stride. She wasn't argumentative. Steven wasn't argumentative. He totally understood. Same thing happened with Sabrina's family. Her family was a bit tougher. They were very, very hesitant to give their blessing because they've seen Sabrina in some really bad situations. Sabrina talks about that as well. But the thing that Sabrina and Steven kept reiterating is, I have found my person. Even with the doubts from their families, they felt so secure and confident in that. And I honestly believe if the situation was different, things would have worked out. This is where we have to talk about long distance. I am not one of those people who believes that you can't be in a successful long distance relationship. However, I think in this situation, to be in a long distance marriage with a person that you've only known for 6 weeks, that is a recipe for disaster. And that's where I also get very frustrated sometimes with the casting team with Love is Blind, because we've seen it happen before in the States where they'll have people who are so far apart. We have people who were in Portland and in Seattle. It's like it's a 3-hour difference, you guys. So if they do meet somebody here and they have to make it work, we're adding additional stressors to an already stressful situation and potential stressors for the relationship. Now you have people who have successfully navigated that. We've got Brett and Tiffany, Kwame and Chelsea. So it's not like it's impossible, but it is something that can contribute to stress in a relationship. So situation like this is hard because this whole process is not really setting them up to successfully have that long distance relationship. I love what Steven said in the reunion when he really exposed the difference between the real world and the show.
When you're dating, it's being paid for. You're in picturesque places. You're falling in love rapidly. It's the best version of you no matter what. You haven't got to worry about where the next penny is coming from, why your partner might be upset. You don't have to worry about any of those things. So everything changes. That's the real world. That was the one thing we wasn't exposed to, that and the distance.
We talk about the real world, you know, when they're transitioning from the pods to the retreat or honeymoon to living in their city in the apartment together. But that's not the real world because you're not worried about rent. You still have cameras following you, which still would make you hyper aware of how you're presenting yourself, dealing dealing with conflict and things like that. And then you're also surrounded by other castmates. It might provide you with support that you wouldn't typically have. And so it's just not real life. This is not what the real world looks like. And they were both so nonchalant with the conversation, particularly Steven. Sabrina would say,
Can you see yourself living here at some point?
There's no rushes there for us to give up one or the other.
No.
and Steven kept saying things like, I don't think we need to worry about that right now. Sabrina would say the same thing. This is how I interpreted it. They're both so free-spirited that they're not going to put pressure on making a decision about where they're going to live now. These are the kind of things that when you ignore them before committing to a relationship, especially before getting married, it becomes an issue. You can't just gloss over the fact that you two live so far apart, and you need to talk about what a schedule would look like. How often would you be able to see me with your work schedule? What are your options for working remotely? Sabrina was basically saying that because she quit her job, she was willing to move to where Steven was. I'm wondering what happened with that. We were seeing a lot of back and forth between, I'd be comfortable just moving, I can now work from anywhere.
Oh no, I'd relocate.
You would relocate?
Yeah, there's a lot more opportunities in London than there is in Belfast for people.
Okay, fair.
To how would you feel about living in Belfast? And then Steven being like, he's open to moving, but he doesn't want to talk about that right now. Just so much avoidance. They pretty much had one major stressor in their relationship, which is figuring out where we're going to live. Instead of really dealing with that stressor, they avoided it. Anytime the conversation came up, they really minimized it so that they would be focused on the fact that they have this amazing connection and just assume that everything is going to just work out. You all, most of the time, that does not work. Most of the couples that I see have an amazing bond, an amazing way that they met. They really want the best for each other. You can tell that they love each other. They might even have similar goals, but there are lifestyle factors that are really getting in the way of them having a successful relationship. I've had it where you've got one partner with kids, one partner who doesn't have kids, but the kids are in the house that they live in, and the couple is fine, but the relationship with the kids is difficult, and that's affecting the couple. We can't just ignore that. We can't just say, because my partner and I are so in love, we're going to overcome any obstacles that come our way. That's unrealistic. I do believe that you can use your love as a way to navigate those stressors, but you need to be willing to plan. You need to be willing to talk about it. Those signs of avoidance were letting us know really early on that basically this couple hadn't really figured out a way to cope with stress as a unit and to communicate about difficult things. Sabrina shared a little bit about her experience with her father.
My dad wasn't around a lot, and it was always like me being like, when are we meeting up? What are we doing? And then it got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to contact him anymore and let's just see how long it takes. And he never contacted me again. And then when I was 28, and my mum, we went out and she's like, look, I have to have a difficult conversation with you. It's not actually your father. I think that's why sometimes I can be quite guarded with men. And I do sometimes find it really difficult to let my guard down.
I was worried about her really being able to fully open herself up to the process. I will go ahead and say that she did surprise me, and I'm curious if any of those initial impressions I had ended up coming up after the experiment. Steven did suggest something along those lines in their union.
So the distance then created, when there was a small problem, it become a big problem. And Sabrina's walls can go up really quickly when there is conflict.
One of the biggest signs for what ended up being a huge problem in their relationship, even though Steven offered comfort.
Sorry that you had to go through that and you haven't had the right man there for you.
Ultimately, he reactivated old wounds that she'd healed from by putting Sabrina in a position where she felt like she was putting in all of the effort for the relationship, reenacting the emotional trauma that she experienced with her father growing up. Sabrina said,
we had agreed that we were going to split our time between Belfast and London for the first year.
I'm very curious what things would have looked like if they would have just made it through that difficult year of living apart and finally had the opportunity to live together, because Sabrina did say that when they were together, things were good. I will say, to me, you guys, I don't fault either one of them for what ended up happening. But I will tell you that based on what we saw in the reunion, I could see so much hurt, disappointment, and resentment from Sabrina. It was very important to her that Steven acknowledge that he changed after the show.
It's like, I can't wait to support you. And I said I wanted to start my own agency, but the support wasn't there.
That was very important to her. I think she needed that public closure. I think because the public witnessed their love story, she needed him to admit that he didn't live up to his vows. And I think originally Steven was trying to be kind of neutral about it and understanding, but also saying you weren't the same after the show either.
You're a man of many words, but not a man off your word, because you did not stick to those vows at all. And I would just like to understand.
Same for yours as well.
You're looking at the past through the lens of jadedness. You're so frustrated and disappointed with how things turned out that you're almost looking to get even. I don't think it's out of maliciousness, but I do think it's out of hurt and just feeling like it's not fair what happened to you. Like you're looking at the other couples who are here and feeling like that should have been us and asking how your partner dropped the ball. What I was kind of frustrated about with Sabrina is that it did definitely seem like she was 100% saying it was all Steven's fault why things didn't work out. This is a concept in one of the models of systemic therapy called contextual therapy, where we talk about balancing the family ledger. And you could tell that Sabrina had been feeling like the ledger was very uneven. She was keeping mental track of every little thing that she had done to make Steven's experience when he came to visit her as smooth as possible.
So like when you came to Belfast, you wanted to go to the gym, so I paid for a car for you to rent a car. I spent £70 in groceries. You wanted an ironing board. I bought you an ironing board to have it mine.
You know, at the time when you're doing it, you're just doing it out of love and care. But then when things don't work out, you're looking back and you feel used, right? To a certain extent. Sabrina said in the past that she's a very considerate person. I think that that is true. She was very considerate, but I think that she felt like Steven was not matching the energy with her consideration. And sometimes, you guys, you have to match energy because you start developing a sense of resentment. I was actually talking with a client not too long ago who was feeling so overwhelmed with their duties as a mother and as a wife, and just feeling like I have to do so much and nobody in my household is doing anything. And I'm like, who's putting the pressure on you to do these things? And she had to admit, basically, I like to see things done a certain way. And so basically the person putting that pressure on you is you. And so she tried it out, not getting to the laundry every week, not cooking every night, going out with friends, and was actually surprised and shocked to see that she was a lot less angry. And that's because when we put so much pressure on ourselves, we really create the perfect storm for resentment. Now, that's not to say that our partners are not responsible for their own things. Like that person's spouse could have done their laundry, but they're never going to if you continue picking up the slack and just being mad about it. And so I think if Sabrina was starting to get to that point of resentment, you know, pulling back, making sure that you are really assessing the situation for what it is, let him see what it's like when you change that energy, not punitively, but just so that things feel a little bit more even for you. If you're feeling frustrated and resentful, they're not getting the best version of you anyway. And I think it's interesting when Sabrina was saying like she felt like Steven wasn't making any accommodations for her.
You know, I was trying to do everything I could to make the relationship work, and I just feel like you made zero accommodations in your life for me or our relationship.
That's valid. We already have a stressful situation going. Let's make each other as comfortable as possible when we're in the other person's space. And she just felt like that wasn't being done for her. I'm curious if she felt like that in the moment at the time, or if it's only in retrospect that she is seeing that. You never really know. And that's the difficult thing. When I get to a couple who's coming to me when they're really on the brink of ending things, it's always hard to assess if hindsight is 2020 or if you're just coming forth about feelings you've been having all along. That's the challenge of talking about the past. With Sabrina and Steven, I think that they both really wanted it to work. It seemed like Sabrina put more effort into it working. But I honestly don't think Steven was ever willing to go toe for toe with her about what he did versus what she did. So I don't know if we really heard his side of things, but I could tell as she was sharing her list of things that she'd done for him, that's where he was starting to get so baffled.
A lot of things that you're saying are not facts, right? Because the words that you're saying, I don't recognise who you are at the moment.
Who is this person? You were keeping track of getting me tea and coffee after a certain level when we feel like things are so unfair. We really almost start being kind of petty and like looking at the smallest things as examples of how we were treated unfairly, which is legitimate. It's legitimate to look at a situation and say the little small details add up, and you were not giving me that sort of consideration that I was giving you. That is valid. That is fair. I just thought it was interesting to see Sabrina's level of frustration, and more specifically, her need to have Steven really admit to what happened after the show, to the point where the host had to cut them off because they're like, this is clearly not the place for the conversation that you two need to have. Unfortunately, this was one of the couples that I loved, but due to lifestyle factors, they were not able to make the relationship work. Do I think that Steven could have done more to make the relationship work? I think that there is definitely a real possibility that he probably could have made some changes that would make the transition easier. I'm very curious about what happened to their original plan when Sabrina said that she'd be totally willing to just move to where Steven was because she quit her job. I think if this couple would have been more honest, if Steven would have said, I'm at a job right now where I absolutely cannot move right now, and I honestly wouldn't be able to visit you a lot. If Sabrina was able to say, even though I plan to move with my business, I can't do that in the foreseeable future. If they would have communicated and said, this is what our schedule is going to look like, these are non-negotiables for times we're going to be getting together. Sabrina was very hurt about Steven canceling Christmas.
Like 2 days before you're meant to be there, and with no respect for me, no consideration for my family and what my family had done, you literally said, it happens, they'll get over it.
But then Steven shared the reason why he had to cancel and is like,
So I will take accountability that I did not show up at Christmas because I managed my finances poorly. I had a lot going on at that Christmas, a hell of a lot, and she knows what happened in the family as well.
I could understand why he had to cancel, but that feeling of being married and having your first Christmas with your husband and he cancels 2 days before, that's not a good feeling. And that might have been the final straw. I really would be very curious about what the actual timeline was of how everything panned out. I know Sabrina's been doing interviews. So again, if you've been watching interviews and you have some more details to provide here, please feel free to share them. I try to keep in mind that I don't think Steven's doing as many interviews, so we really don't know his side of things. But if you know some useful information from Sabrina's interviews, please feel free to share them below. Like I said, Love is Blind is becoming so big with all of the content outside of the show that sometimes it's hard to stay on top of all of the articles and podcasts and everything that's coming out. So those are my thoughts on Sabrina and Steven. I'm curious about your thoughts. Do you think that Steven and Sabrina would have worked out if they were living in the same city? Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like this video, share it with anyone who would like to see a therapist breakdown, or loves reality TV, or Love is Blind. And I want to thank the Parrot app for sponsoring a portion of today's video. Please click the link in my description box for 50% off of a premium subscription. Thank you for watching this video all the way until the end. You didn't have to do that, but the fact that you did actually helps me out so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you.